Across Britain, thousands of historic buildings have been neglected. Their owners struggling to restore them because of planning restrictions, design problems or lack of money. Luckily, some romantics do take on the challenge of converting and restoring these forgotten gems. But it isn't for the faint-hearted.
You've got to be slightly crazy.
I think it can push you to the limit, actually.
We have to find a way of getting this done, because if we don't, then we lose everything.
There are often churches, mills and barns, but also factories, warehouses and industrial buildings that are often abandoned because they're so difficult for residential conversion. These buildings have as much rich history and tell as many fascinating stories about our past as any stately home or medieval castle.
These are palaces of industry, and so it's such a privilege to live in one.
As an architect, I relish the challenge that these unusual buildings give us when we're trying to create a place called home. This time, I return to Northumberland, where a couple have battled to restore a 17th century watermill.
When you've had the blood, sweat and tears, the real feel it is yours, and you've earned it.
And I find out whether this 350-year-old building can be brought back to life. What's going on with the roof?
Just rent.
I'm in Northumberland, the northernmost county in England, and one of my old stomping grounds. On the outskirts of the market town of Rothbury, where the River Coquet narrows and passes through a rocky channel, stands picturesque Thrum Mill, a well-loved local landmark. The mill was built in 1665 by the Duke of Northumberland's estate, and its wheel continued to turn until the 1960s. This Grade 2 listed but forgotten gem was eventually bought in 2008 by shoe shop owner Dave Headley and his wife Margaret for £245,000. Their dream is to restore Thrum Mill and turn it into a family home for them and their two grown-up children. There are no less than 18 separate conservation and planning restrictions on the building, including all original features which need to be kept, no additional windows can be added, and that the watermill wheel itself is reinstated and built using traditional materials.
Our friends all know we're crazy, full-on crazy. No normal people would buy the mill.
Crazy romantics.
This part of Britain is just so stunningly beautiful, but at the same time it's got a kind of a real grit to it, where the architecture and all the buildings are just so super strong and such a fundamental part of the northeastern heritage. Oh, look at that, what a fantastic building. From the front doors, this is
Hey,
How are you, Mrs. Margaret? Nice to meet you. How are you?
Lovely to
You well?
meet you too.
What a great building you've got.
That's fantastic.
Super
Fantastic.
looking.
Come on, we'll show
Super
you.
looking.
Super, it is
So you gonna have a look around?
fantastic.
Yes.
Where's the best place to go?
Ryan's dying to show you.
It's a bit noisy down here now.
That's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
You couldn't have picked a more difficult site, could you really? Couldn't even put the scaffold up must have been a challenge.
It was. Oh,
Lethal. I'm not even going to ask you why you went for this property.
Sat here all this time. Somebody could have done it, but they didn't. They waited for us.
I mean, it's not just about owning it. You know, you've got to have your input in this. You've got to have had the blood, sweat and tears. You know, and then when you've had the blood, sweat and tears, you know, you will feel it is yours, and you've earned it.
Dave is planning to do most of the work himself, and he's got the luxury of not having to finish it by a particular date. One of his biggest challenges is going to be reinstating the mill wheel. It's a key condition of their planning consent, and Dave also wants to use the wheel to generate hydroelectricity to power their new home. So how high would this wheel have been?
14 foot.
Really?
14,
That's
yeah.
massive.
8 wood spokes,
Yeah.
a metal outer ring.
Can I stand on it?
You can, yeah. Yeah.
So you're going to recreate the wheel?
Recreate it, yeah. Hydro's the best option. Might as well get some hydro.
Well, you'd be mad not to do it, really, wouldn't you? You've got this amazing natural power source next to you that can provide all that energy. It's a great way of dragging this building back into the 21st century, but also reusing it, isn't it? You're recycling the building, You're using the energy just the same way they did 150 years ago, just for a slightly different purpose, that's all.
Have a look at the mill, which obviously needs quite a bit of work done.
Oh my God, you've still got the millstones in
Still got
place.
the
Yes.
millstones.
All there.
Can I walk on all this?
Yes, you're fine.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what's this room going to be in here?
This is living room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Lounge.
My God, you've got your work cut out.
Yeah.
The millstones take up most of the far end of the ground floor, but it's written into their planning permission that all of the original mill machinery must be left in place.
Well, that's the challenge. You've got to make all these, artifacts work for themselves. They've got to be unique room features.
Up to the bedrooms.
Up to the bedroom.
Yeah.
I love the way you're saying it as if it's all finished. I love that. So this is the bedroom.
All it takes is a little imagination and we're
Yeah.
there.
So this is going to be the view from your bedroom.
Yeah.
Yep. That's the one.
Oh my God. Look at that.
We were able to watch the salmon leap right from this spot.
Yep.
The lower floor of the mill is currently accessed by some rickety stairs, leading to its own entrance.
So here we go down to the kitchen.
It's a rustic finish.
The rustic look.
Yeah.
Where's all this come from? From the floor?
That's come from the firebox.
An amazing amount of stone,
That's
that.
the spoils.
What's the risk of flooding in this?
Floods. Well,
Really?
when we bought, the report come back, balance of probability, twice in 100 years.
Twice in 100 years.
We've had 2 floods in 2 years.
Are you joking?
They knew exactly where to put a water mill.
Yeah. And then you've got all this kit, all still in place, which is unbelievable, really.
You still got the wooden shaft.
Yeah.
The wheel itself, it would have had a shaft that size
Yeah.
in wood. You don't see them in everybody's kitchen, do you?
No, definitely not. Since they bought the mill, Dave and Margaret have commissioned much-needed archaeological survey work, and for 3 years have been wading through conservation red tape. But finally, they're able to start work. The mill is built over 3 floors, anchored into the bedrock of the river. The lower floor will become their kitchen, incorporating the mill machinery, which will be operational. The old cookhouse will be a snug, with a mezzanine bedroom for guests. The lower floor of the kiln will be turned into a utility room. A new staircase runs up to the ground floor, which has direct access out to the country lane. This will be their living room, complete with future millstones. There'll also be a storage room, a cloakroom and a study, which will occupy the upper floor of the kiln. Another flight of stairs takes us up to the top floor, which will be divided into 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. The mill is Grade 2 listed, so Dave and Margaret aren't allowed to add or enlarge any windows. But the skylights in the roof will bring much needed light into the whole space. I absolutely love everything about this project. It's the most beautiful building and the most beautiful location. But this is unbelievably tough. They've got 18 separate planning conditions on this building. They've got conservation officers, the Environment Agency, everybody in the local area all having a view about what they're going to do here. And not only that, this building could flood at any time. The restoration of Thrum Mill is now in its 4th month, but progress has been slow. This is because Dave is busy running his shop and can only be on site 3 days a week. Dave has been helped by his son Chris, who's an electrician by trade. For such a difficult project, Dave and Margaret have a challenging budget of just £125,000.
I just like it. I just like being here, like doing all the work.
Outside, work on the new water wheel has begun. Dave is constructing a wooden template which will help him confirm the final measurements.
Make a note of that. It's catered by 3 inches that side.
Conservation are insisting that the new wheel looks as much like the original as possible, so Dave's using old photographs of the mill as a guide.
It's a big piece of engineering, that's what I would call it.
The water wheel is going well, but the stairs are problematic. The plans Dave and Margaret inherited included a design for a staircase that goes up through all 3 floors, But when Dave began to mark this out, he found there wasn't enough headroom on the ground floor to comply with building regs. The constraints of this old building makes a redesign difficult.
Can't move the windows, can't move the doorways. So the options are move the staircase to another part of the building, or spiral staircase. It's going to be a spiral staircase as far as I can see, unless there's a stroke of genius.
While Dave and Margaret face the challenge of changing the fundamental purpose of this building, I'm keen to look back into the history of the mill. I've managed to unearth a map from 1833, which clearly marks our mill. However, further upstream is another site called Old Mill. I've no idea what the relationship is between them, but both were under the ownership of the Duke of Northumberland. So I've come to the heart of the estate, Alnwick Castle, home to an incredible private archive.
Morning, Chris.
Hello, George.
How are you?
Welcome to Alnwick Castle.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Unbelievably, Chris Hunwick, the estate's archivist, has found a link between this mysterious old mill and one of the most infamous events in British history.
Well, the 9th Earl, under whom that mill was built, spent nearly 17 years in the Tower of London, implicated in the Gunpowder Plot.
That's amazing.
He put his cousin, Thomas Percy, in charge of the castle here as constable.
Yeah.
And Thomas was one of the key conspirators who actually hired the rooms underneath the House of Lords to store the gunpowder.
My God.
And unfortunately for the 9th Earl, the night before the plot, he popped over to Sion House, where the 9th Earl was in residence, on the outskirts of London, and possibly tipped off the 9th Earl that he might not want to go to Parliament the next day.
I see. And so then how did the mill come about? What's the connection there?
Well, the Earl was fined £30,000 for his implication in the plot. So the Earl set about improving his estates to improve the revenue so that he could pay for his fine. And mills were critical to that. There we are. Welcome to the archives, George.
Oh my word. What a fantastic place. Look at this.
In this Rothbury box here, we've got a letter from 1608. And you'll see here, this is a letter from William Ord, the collector of rents for the Earl, based in Rothbury.
Yeah.
He's writing to the Earl in the Tower. And he suggests an improvement for the estate. You see this. This is a new rent. I have agreed for the building of a fulling mill to be built on the river of Coquet, or Coquet. This first mill, known as Thrum Mill, was a fulling mill, so it's to do with wool. So this is his suggestion, that if the Earl outlays £12 to build a new mill, he'll get £5 back per annum thereafter.
If he had to pay back his £30,000 fine.
Yeah, yeah.
£30,000 is a staggering amount of
It
money if you
is.
can build a mill for 12 quid.
Exactly.
55 years later, our mill, a corn mill, is built a few hundred yards downstream, and Chris is able to show me the very first lease.
Here we are. So you'll see, interestingly, this is labelled Rothbury New Mill, alias Thrum Mill. This is quite nicely written. And so this now describes this as all that watercorn mill with the appurtenances now erected or to being erected upon the river of Coquet. And the first tenant is Richard Gare, and that's his mark. We don't know exactly what happened to that first one, but it could have been flooded out. The Coquet does flood often, even now.
Yeah,
it could have been to do with the ravages of the Civil War. So perhaps the fulling mill falls out of use during the course of the 17th century, and then this new mill is built a bit closer to the Thrum, where the force of the water is really powerful.
It's been 4 months since I was last at Thrum, and I'm looking forward to seeing how things have moved on.
Morning, mate. How you doing? Hey, George.
And the news is the staircase problem hasn't gone away. Dave is still struggling to come up with a design that works for him, the planners and building regulations.
Instinctively, and I mean I've only just turned up on site, so there might be other constraints on the back of this, but instinctively I was thinking, why doesn't the staircase, and it might feel like it divides the room up a bit more on this level, but your upper level would work better, is actually if your staircase went up here, turned, and went up again. So instead of being a long linear stair, which is going to wreck your bedrooms upstairs and your bathrooms and everything else.
Yeah.
Actually, you do a kind of tighter, more contained stair. It wouldn't be a spiral. I'm not a fan of spirals, to be honest, because I think.
Not in a mill, especially.
Well, the other thing is sometimes it's pointless because with a spiral staircase, you're still going to have the same width turning back on itself anyway.
By changing the linear staircase to one that turns, it will comply with all the regulations and won't block any windows. I've also suggested that Dave and Margaret move the master bedroom ensuite to the centre of the plan to make the bedroom the full width of the mill.
The compromise would be on your bedroom too at the back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah? To come along and down, the staircase is then going to have to turn back on itself around here, which means this is the door position that might have to move to make it work. You might have to move that door position from here to somewhere like here.
Outside, the water wheel is taking shape.
Look at that!
That's got the overall dimensions.
That's fantastic, that!
It's going to be oak spokes for the outer rim, for the spokes. For
Are you making it?
Yeah. Who else am I going to have do my wheel?
You know, I think what it is it's literally like a lonely building. You know, it's used to noise. You should come through the door, and there should just be noise and vibration.
It's just it's a living thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it
It's
is.
a dynamic piece of architecture. It's not something that's just standing still. It's active, kinetic piece of kit.
On the lower level where the kitchen will be, Dave's been busy. He's cleared the rubble and lifted the old flagstones before installing underfloor heating. Today he's got the boys together to start relaying the floor, and he's asked me to lend a hand.
Nah, that is a heavy bit of stone now. Well, I picked the heaviest one first. You're going to have a hernia.
I think that's the thickest
You
one.
definitely stitched this.
Yeah, good on you, George.
See, most architects just sit in the office all day. Put little sketches, few doodles. Start with all the lads, straight into it. They're all different thicknesses and everything. You're working with a natural material that was here for kind of industrial use, really. And it's important to try and get those levels right, so when we put a bed of mortar down there, it's going to be like pushing these things in, trying to level them all out. And we just need a very gentle slope from that top edge all the way down to all the mill gear, because if this place does have a flood, we need to get the water out.
Thrum Mill's solid construction and fortress-like appearance is why it stood the test of time. But back when it was built, flooding was the least of its worries. For 300 years, our mill was at the centre of a battleground between England and Scotland. From the 14th century to the beginning of the 17th century, people lived in fear of being killed and robbed, not only by armies, but marauding neighbours known as border reivers, who destroyed anything that stood in their way. Snailholm Tower across the border in Scotland was built in the 15th century as a protection against the reivers. Historian Alistair Moffat is a descendant of a reiving family and an expert on these troubled times.
So just looking at this building, I mean, it's incredibly strong, very well kind of fortified, very defensible. Is that why Thrum was built the way it was?
Without a doubt. You know, it's a little fortress on the Coquet.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it looks like. I mean, this is in a defensive position. This is on top of a crag, and you can see for 30 miles from here, but Thrum's on the side of the Coquet in a real declivity, and that means it's more vulnerable.
It's amazing how it changes your perception of a place when you understand its history. I always thought Thrum was a really romantic, idyllic spot. Actually, it must have been bloody scary to be a miller there.
Very scary. It was built at a time when this was a thoroughly criminalised society. Now, what's your head?
My word, Alistair, this is unbelievable.
Rothbury is away over there, just at the tail of the Cheviot Hills.
Yeah.
There'd be a watchman here, George, be looking for bands of reivers, and he'd light a beacon if he saw them, to warn everybody around about to get their beasts inside, to find their weapons, to hide their women, and all that kind of thing.
In 1603, King James succeeds Elizabeth I, and as King of Scotland and England, unites the two countries, ushering in a more peaceful age. But change doesn't happen overnight, and the fear of violence was still present 60 years later, when David and Margaret's mill was built.
The building a mill at Rothbury that looks like a blockhouse You know, all of that certainly was a testament to a dreadful and terrible past.
And the Reavers, did they die out because of the border changing?
They did. They essentially calmed down and took up rugby.
It's summer, and we're now 6 months into this unique restoration.
Morning. What's going on with the roof? Has it collapsed?
Yeah, just went.
Just went.
The rest of it went in, yeah.
Dave and his team are trying to keep the costs down by doing most of the work themselves. They were going to employ a specialist contractor to reconstruct the main roof, but they've now taken the bold step of tackling this job as well.
I think you should take it off.
Think so?
Yeah, I do. Because even though the slates are in fantastic nick, I think when you look at all the stonework you've got to do up the parapet edge, and the chimney, and the ridge, and the fact you've got to refelt, re-insulate, you might as well just strip it back and start from scratch. In fact, it'll probably be quicker and easier.
You've talked us into it?
Sorry, mate.
Most people would become disheartened by such a challenging restoration, but Dave seems to be thriving on it.
You're testing your own limits and pushing yourself to see whether you can make it work. Personally, whether you can do it.
Well, that's true, because, I mean, there's certain people who've had out on this and they're saying, oh, you can't have that, you can't do it, you can't do that. And I think, well, actually, I think I can, and I think I will.
Dave and his team have now repaired all of the old stone walls and chimneys, and they've reconstructed the roof. But while all this work was going on, Dave's wife Margaret, who already suffers from arthritis, fell ill with pneumonia.
Poor Dave got a bit of a fright.
I'm not surprised, I bet you did, Grace. What happened exactly?
I don't know, I was busy putting the roof on.
And then?
And we've got this strange little text come to the hospital now. And we got taken into a side room and told she was in intensive care, so...
Intensive care?
Well, they told me they were going to ventilate me and take me to intensive care and ventilate me. And I just panicked thinking, what happens then, you know? Sometimes you don't come back out of it, which the doctors even thought I wasn't going to.
Now that Margaret's health is improving, Dave's focus is back on the build. In the meantime, I've managed to explore deeper into our mill's past, discovering that it was once leased by Sir William George Armstrong, one of the great inventors of the Victorian age. Thrum Mill fueled his fascination with the power of moving water. Armstrong's hydraulic inventions made his fortune, with which he built Craigside, a magnificent Tudor revival mansion close to Thrum Mill. Here he pursued his fascination with hydroelectricity, which generated power for his estate.
Morning, Henrietta.
Hello, good morning.
How are you?
Henrietta Heald is the author of a book on the life and work of William Armstrong.
What technology and inventions did he bring to Craigside?
Craigside was the first house in the world to be lit by hydroelectricity. It was actually in this room, in this gallery, as it is known, that light came on for the first time.
That's a staggering achievement for any building and inventor, isn't it?
It is, indeed. And, of course, it happened with the help of Joseph Swan, because Joseph Swan was a Newcastle chemist. He was a friend of Armstrong, and he had just managed to perfect, after many years of trying, the first light bulb. Armstrong had the power, and he had the means. 1880s, actually, was when it first came on.
The first light bulb comes on, powered by hydroelectricity.
Yes.
I mean, incredibly ecological for its time.
Craigside became known as the Palace of the Modern Magician, a showcase for all the latest technologies of the age. Armstrong's hydroelectrics powered hot and cold running water and even central heating. It was the only house of its time to boast such luxuries. It's now 18 months into the restoration, and despite the improved appearance of the stonework, the scaffolding is still up. However, Margaret is back on site and is keen to show me one major development.
Ready now.
Margaret?
Hello.
There you are. How are you?
Inside, on the lower floor, in what will be their kitchen, Dave and Margaret have a long way to go, but there is one big development.
Staircases in?
Staircases in. 2 staircases.
You've cracked it.
Cracked it, at last.
Slowly, slowly, it's coming together, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how does the staircase look upstairs? Is that one in as
Great,
well?
do you wanna have a look?
Yeah, come on.
Yeah.
Actually, when you get to this level, it works really well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Because I know you were worried about it coming too far into the space.
Yeah. No,
When you think of
agree.
all the restrictions of your head height, hitting that timber, avoiding the wind upstairs, getting the wall in the right position upstairs,
Yeah.
it was really difficult.
Yeah.
You've probably come up with the best and the most efficient scheme, and actually I think that's the only way it would have worked.
Yeah.
It's great.
That's brilliant.
This is it.
Class.
Restoring the mill's wheel is part of the planning conditions. At a cost of £12,000, 224 individual pieces of steel are being cut that will make up the wheel's outer rim.
And the way this has been cut, it's like 21st century laser technology, slicing through steel like a knife through butter. Is this it?
This is
We're
it.
together already, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's coming together quick.
The nice thing about this stuff is because it's been made in all these individual bits, means you could actually assemble it on site in sections, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could.
I had this mad image that this 4.5-ton lump of a whale was come out in one big massive section, but I mean the steel of that weight, you'd never get it in.
No. Oh, that's it, right. You just pick it up there, you know?
A few weeks later, and after a call from Dave and Margaret, I'm back at the mill. There's been a major flood, their third in 4 years.
I honestly thought when I came around that headland, if it wasn't there, you know, I wouldn't be surprised because there was so much destruction. I thought the Gable End would have gone. Yeah, that's all the scaffolding boards away, you see. That's all my bottom stage gone.
All the scaffolding boards gone.
And the amount of debris, you know, heavy materials that came down, and the velocity.
Well, so you had, what, trees coming down, branches?
Security fencing, gate posts, unbelievably big stones. And the mill race, which was empty, is 4 and 5 foot full of heavy stones. You know, it's jam-packed with debris, which, you know, it's going to be absolutely murder at the moment.
It's kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back on this build, isn't it? You make a big leap ahead and then you get knocked by the weather and you have to take a back step and then get your head down and get stuck into it again.
Has he not told his broke his rib?
He broke his ribs?
Broken rib, yeah. It's only a week ago since he done it. He's not supposed to be doing anything at all. He's tackled the windows, he's been doing all sorts of ridiculous things that he shouldn't have been doing. But he can't stop himself.
He doesn't know the meaning of the word rest.
No chance.
At all, does he?
So there's a tiny bit of us thinks, oh, drat, Dave's hurt himself. How long is that going to push me mill back?
I first came to Thrum Mill almost 2 years ago. Despite the enormous challenges they've faced personally and financially, Dave and Margaret have never given up on their dream. To keep costs down, Dave and the family have done most of the work themselves, but they've still come to the limit of their £125,000 budget.
Morning.
Hi, Giles.
How are you?
Hi, how are you?
What a fantastic day.
Gorgeous.
Absolutely beautiful.
After 50 years of neglect, this building has finally been saved. The entire roof has been restored and for the first time is fully insulated. All the original stonework has been repaired and repointed, a great achievement by Dave and the family.
Look at that. The stonework looks beautiful, the windows are fantastic, and the roof, you can tell it's really well insulated because the snow hasn't melted.
Come in, George.
Before they started the restoration, the lower floor was a mess of broken masonry and abandoned mill machinery. It was hard to believe that this could ever become a home.
Oh, look at that. Oh, it's really good, isn't it? Really homely, really beautiful. Everything you look at just feels really rich in terms of the material and the detail, isn't it?
We didn't want to overdo it. You know, you really could overdo it. You had to get the right balance.
I don't think it matters at all about how long this has taken. And
I
actually,
mean, I have been slightly fanatical. If it took a week to do something, it took a week. You just have to sign that week off.
with a restoration project like this, it takes a long time.
But there can't be any shortcut.
To celebrate the building's agricultural past, Dave's put the old mill machinery behind glass. It's a practical and elegant way to display the working parts of this building that will one day generate power for their new home.
Absolutely perfect, the way that you've kept all the old features, and you've just had a build around it, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think we still have a comfortable living space, you know, which you have to have. I mean, you've got to live with it every day.
And noise-wise, I'm a bit shocked. Because you put the new windows in, fully double glazed, it's so quiet.
Have a try.
The cost of rebuilding the entire roof and a hefty £25,000 to connect electricity to the mill has meant the funds for the water wheel have dried up. So their dream of moving in and having the wheel turning again will have to wait.
I mean, ideally what we need is we need a break in the weather. You know, we can have a good few solid days on it, if not weeks.
Weeks, I think.
It's, I mean, it's
Definitely weeks.
Because it's an engineering project in itself.
Yeah.
You know, just because of the weight of all the pieces. You know, we've got to make all the yoke spokes, we've got to make all the paddles. And the only way we can make them really is on site, on the job, as it's being built, section by section.
You've done the right thing holding off. The question is now, how long have you got to wait for this weather to drop, the water level to drop, and give you the few weeks you need to get the wheel on? And that's turning against the mill. I mean, that's going to be the icing on the cake when it's finished. I think it's brilliant that this mill is going to have a working wheel back on there.
Anything, so we're not going to rush that.
Yeah. I don't blame you.
I love it that Dave and Margaret have never wanted to compromise on this project. Combine this with the 18 stringent planning conditions has meant that this restoration project was always going to move at a slow pace. When I first came here, the ground floor was an abandoned wreck, falling apart at the seams. Dave and his small team have transformed it into a bright, uplifting space. They've raised the floor up to the level of the millstones and have started laying the new wooden floor. Upstairs, the bedroom walls have been constructed with their high glass partitions that will make the best use of the available light, and the ensuite bathrooms are taking shape. This restoration has been a superhuman effort and one that I'm proud to have been part of.
Present your Thrum Mill history book. This is your life of Thrum Mill.
All right.
Congratulations on your amazing achievements so far. And it is mine. And there it is. There's Thrum Mill. Full story. There's you two. Look at that. In the end. So that's yours.
Fantastic.
The history of Thrum Mill.
Oh, thank you very much,
Oh, that's
George.
great.
That's amazing.
That's fantastic.
Cheers.
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 Congratulations
Thank you, George.
to Thrum Mill.
Thrum Mill, yeah.
After nearly 2 years of restoration work, Dave and Margaret now need to raise more finance to get over the final hurdle. They still have to complete the bedrooms and bathrooms, but can only move in once the water wheel is under construction, and that remains their biggest challenge.
What Dave and Margaret have achieved here is nothing short of being unbelievable. And they've always said it'll be finished when it's finished. And you know what, when it is, I can't wait to come back.
5 years ago, shopkeeper Dave and his wife Margaret bought this 17th century Grade 2 listed water mill. They've battled through archaeological surveys and complex planning and conservation restrictions to transform this abandoned local landmark into their dream home.
It's not just about owning it. You know, you've got to have your input in it. You've got to have had the blood, sweat and tears. You know, and then when you've had the blood, sweat and tears, you know, you will feel it is yours and you've earned it.
The planners stipulated that before they moved in, construction of a working water wheel had to start. In order for the wheel to be as faithful to its original design as possible, Dave has consulted specialists in every aspect of its construction.
They're all-time engineers, so they understand, you know, the complexities of that kind of job.
But with only the original wheel shaft left, Dave's embraced modern techniques by galvanising the new steelwork to protect it for generations to come.
I'm hoping that, you know, this wheel, when it's on, you know, it'll last 100 years.
Now, after 5 years of planning the missing piece of Thrum Mill, this giant kit of parts is being delivered to site.
There's absolutely months and months and months in the planning, so it all boils down to now.
It is really important because we've waited so long. I mean, a water mill isn't a water mill without a water wheel.
Because it's summer, the River Coquet is at its lowest level. Perfect conditions for Dave and the family to unite the new steel with the original shaft.
It's a bit of a battle at the minute. You know, it seems to be testing us.
This is a difficult job because the wheel has to be perfectly aligned with the old building.
We've measured, double measured, triple measured, went away and thought about it and then measured it here.
Dave is using very traditional techniques to construct the wheel and is pushing his body to the limit.
He's had his broken ribs and he's nearly lost his eyesight with his Lyme experience, and Every day there's a new bash.
Margaret has so much faith in Dave's ability, but with 224 separate components to precisely piece together, it's a massive undertaking.
This wheel has set us back in a lot. We've borrowed, and that's it. We've run out now. It's all gone on that wheel.
The wheel just completely defines the whole project. And it's finally going to look like it used to look 100 years ago.
It's been a year since I was last at the mill, and I'm back to see if Dave and Margaret have completed their ultimate challenge.
So is the wheel on?
The wheel's on?
It's on!
It's on now,
At
yeah.
last!
It is, huh?
That's really exciting, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
And what was it like getting it here?
It's tough, yeah.
And then actually constructing the wheel, what was that like?
Long and arduous.
Did you do it?
Yeah, we did it, yeah. Did it all ourselves, yeah.
That's a major engineering job, that is. And there it is, in all of its glory.
This majestic water wheel, the very heart of the building's original design and function, is turning again, for the first time in over 50 years. This is a beautiful piece of precision engineering and craftsmanship. At 14 feet in diameter, the wheel took Dave and his team 6 months to construct and restore.
You've made history. That is an absolute replica of what was there. The original hubs, the original shaft, that was what was there for over 100 years.
All that hard work has paid off. It's been worth all the blood, sweat and tears.
It's been a hard slog, but it is a beauty.
Can we get it going?
Yeah.
Come on,
Come on,
let's take it in a sweet shop. Huge woman. Right there, she goes, look.
She's away.
This is on the go. Look at that. That is fantastic.
Made me cry the first time I seen it, George.
The power. You know, the power of the natural forces of that river to drive the engineering and the architecture at that pace. I mean, the amount of energy you'll get from that would be brilliant.
The river powers the wheel at an average pace of 10 revolutions a minute. At this rate, the 32 paddles can comfortably produce 8 kilowatts of energy per hour. That's enough to power 80 light bulbs.
You built that, and that. It's like...
Oh, well done.
Happy days. I mean, no matter what this builder's throwing at you, you just get on with it. You're a grafter.
Yeah. There's a property for everybody, you know, and everybody might look at it. But there's always that one person who buys it and has a vision. And they're the people, you know, that see it through.
We are just ordinary, normal people. And if we can do it, anybody can.
You're going, aren't you?
Well, I'm going to drink the champagne.
Cheers.
Cheers, Dom.
Cheers, Nick.
On my last visit, they'd spent £125,000 and the mill was far from being complete. Now they've spent a total of £160,000. The ground floor is now fully transformed with 3 millstones embedded into the floor and the rotating mechanism takes centre stage.
Well, George, this is it.
And it is
Welcome
looking
to our lovely home.
absolutely incredible.
Yeah?
What a
Like
great
it?
space. Look at this. Spinning around in your front room.
Fall asleep.
Really? I could.
Yeah.
Just dragging my feet around.
You can just listen to the rhythm of the wheel in the water.
Because you know that that's connected to what's going on outside, that's connected to the river.
Yeah.
You know, the building's really engaging with all the natural elements.
Margaret has lifted the spirit of Thrum Mill, styling their new home in a sensitive and traditional way. Upstairs, what was once a derelict space is now fully lime-washed. The new bedrooms and en-suites have been beautifully designed using glass in the rafters, allowing natural light into each room.
To be able to lie here and look up and see all these beautiful timbers over your head, and then to be able to look through that glass and see all that timber work and all the detailing that's gone in to this old building.
Yeah.
Spatially, it just makes it 1,000 times more interesting. So what's all the scaffolding up here for then?
This is the annex to the mill. It's our next project, George.
You two just don't stop, do you?
Uncovering this building's turbulent history has been a real treat for me. Margaret has also discovered a secret historic gem, once concealed within its very walls.
Something else to show you, though, George.
You got something else?
Yeah.
What is it?
This is very exciting. Dave found these in the kiln.
In the kiln?
In the kiln, in the wall.
Yeah, they were just in a wee little box. They were glass slides. I mean, it's from the early days of photography.
And you've had these printed from that?
This man turns out to be Lord Armstrong's nephew who inherited Cragside.
You're
That's
kidding
Henry
me.
William Armstrong. Why was there a glass slide of him in the kiln at Thrug Mill?
That is such a powerful connection with the history. There's a bit
You
of
look
likeness there. If I
I
was
was
taking a
gonna
little
say-
touch on you there.
I was just going to say,
You
you
get
look
a bit
like
of
a
your hair
hard
back.
worker, but you've just
Yeah, this is
confirmed
crafty.
that.
Historically, it keeps
It
getting
is. It is.
all the time.
Thanks to Dave and Margaret, it's safe to say that after a 5-year battle, Thrug Mill has been saved. Through all their efforts, endless drive and their ultimate love for the building, they've now earned the right to be called custodians of one of Northumberland's historic treasures.
But I've got something to give to you.
You've got a present for Dave. You didn't know about this, did you?
No, I didn't know anything about it.
Let's have it.
Wow, what's this then?
Maybe I'll do. This is
Have a
you.
look. Some people want it to happen, some wish it would happen, others make it happen.
Alright. Alright. That's me, is it?
That's you.
Alright. Well, thank you very much.
Oh, that's not from me, that's from your missus, mate. I think she deserves a hug for that.
Oh, come on. Well, I'm touched. So where are we putting that then?
Well, probably.
Before you get...
You two are turning away because you're both filling up. I love it. They're both looking at the wall because they're both getting really emotional. I love it. He's desperate to get out of the shot.
I'll be alright.
Give her a hug.
Oh, come on, quick.
You've made your Margaret history, you've done it, and you've done it together, you know. Powerful stuff.
It is.
Do you think the journey you've been on and what you've achieved, it's incredible, I think. Incredible. You should be proud of each other.
We've been married for years and years and years. So,
Yeah, the restoration
so
dream team.
we know each other, you know, everybody, each other's thoughts process. You know, she knows what I'm thinking, I know what she's thinking, so, you know, usually.
I know what he's thinking, and I'm usually thinking, oh no.
Dave and Margaret are a brilliant team. Dave is the relentless grafter who, no matter what the bill throws at him, he never ever gives up. And Margaret has that magic touch to create a really sensitive period home. Now, they regard themselves as being the lucky ones, having the opportunity to save this building. But actually, it's the building that's lucky, having such incredible guardians. This is one of the best projects I've ever seen. Why? Because it's a restoration without compromise.
To collect information and inspiration from the show and your own online scrapbook, or if you have a project you'd like to be featured in the next series, go to channel4.com/George.
Well, if you missed Selling Houses with Amanda Lamb on More 4 last night, catch up now with 4OD. But coming up, tonight's patients at King's are all having unexpectedly eventful days. It's the last in the current series of 24 Hours.